Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. We're looking at Matthew 24, 29 to 31. I've been sharing with you for several weeks, actually, the language of the sun being darkened, the moon being turned to blood, the stars of heaven falling from sky. And look, there's another little phrase here in verse 29 that is very often all but overlooked in the interpretation of these verses. Now, it's kind of interesting that many commentators want to take the language of the sun being dark and the moon being turned to blood, etc., absolutely literally. That's prediction of the end of time. Well, the Bible doesn't predict the end of time. Well, that's the end of the current age. Well, the current Christian age has no end. So the presuppositional approach to these verses simply does not work. Now, notice this phrase, however, that should, I would suggest, that should turn our focus from the material and physical to the spiritual. Because at the time, and let's not forget this, all of this context here is Judea-centric, temporally delimited to the time of the apostles. When you see the abomination, flee, for then shall be great tribulation. You're going to see it, flee from it. Nothing could more clearly prove that the abomination of desolation, the great tribulation, would be in that generation and Judea-centric. Okay. Again, verse 29. The sun shall be darkened. The moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven. Now watch this. And the powers of the heaven shall be shaken. Powers of the heavens. What in the world is that? Jesus was expressing here the tremendous victory over the spiritual forces of evil. This is the victory over Satan, the, quote, God of this age, unquote, Ephesians chapter 2, where Paul said, you were once dead, but now you've been made alive through Christ. But guess what? You once walked according to the prince of the power of the air, according to the power of the God of this world. But they've been delivered from that. Folks, we have to understand that this is Jesus predicting the final victory over Satan. Now, I want to share with you a couple of passages here that are directly related to this. In Colossians chapter 2, Paul exhorts the Gentiles not to be subjected to Torah when they came into Christ, not to allow the Judaizers to impose the law, circumcision, the sacrifices, focus on the land, etc., etc. Need to get my book, Misplaced Mind, Colossians 3, 1 to 2, and Dispensationalism for a study of all that. But nonetheless, the reason that they're not supposed to be judged by any of that, Paul says, is because they belong to Christ. And here's what Christ did through the power of the cross. He disarmed principalities and powers. He made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them in it. Now, you got to go back to John chapter 12, 31 and following. Now is the hour of judgment. Now the God of this age will be cast out. Now, you know, futurists have got a major problem here. Hope you do see that. Jesus said that it was through the cross, through the power of the cross, through the power of his death, his burial, and his resurrection, that the God of this age was to be cast out. And Jesus didn't say, it'll happen in 3 or 4 or 5 million years. Now shall the God of this world be cast out. Oh, but wait a minute. Here in Matthew, Jesus is predicting that to happen at his coming on the clouds. Well, guess what, folks? The cross was not Jesus' coming on the clouds. Anybody knows that, don't they? But the cross initiated Jesus' victory. It was the foundational victory. And so, guess what? This concept of victory over the spiritual forces in the heavenly places. What did Paul say in Ephesians chapter 6? Verse 12 and 13. We do not fight with flesh and blood. We do not war with flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers in the heavenly places. Now, if Jesus completely cast Satan out, if Jesus had already destroyed Satan, which no one really believes, he initiated the victory. He initiated that ultimate end. And so the battle was still going on against those principalities and the powers in the heavenly places, against the God of that age. And let's not forget, that was in the heavenly, spiritual, unseen realm. Now, in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, Paul said that at his coming, at the coming of the Son of Man, on the clouds of heaven, which is Matthew 24, verse 29, we, Paul said, to those first century living, breathing saints, those who were then alive, some of whom would live and remain until that event, we shall meet him, watch this, catch the power of this, in the air. That word air there is air. And it's a reference to the spiritual realm of the spiritual wickedness in high places, in the heavenly places. What Jesus initiated through the power of the cross, Colossians chapter 2, would be consummated at his coming. Everyone knows that, don't they? I mean, after all, we're told over and over and over again that, quote, this age broke into the old age. Okay. Jesus triumphed over the spiritual wickedness in the spiritual realm. Let's face it, if you were looking at the cross strictly through the physical eyes, Jesus did not win. If you're looking with physical eyes. But he triumphed over that through his resurrection. Now, there's something visible to look at, but what they saw was proof of his victory over the spiritual forces. That's what Paul says in Colossians 2. So here we have in John chapter 12, here we have in Colossians chapter 2, the initiation. Well, guess what? Paul, in Romans chapter 16 and verse 20 says, and now the God of peace shall crush Satan under your feet shortly. There's consummation. Matthew 24, 29. That's consummation. By the way, that's resurrection. And so for those who say, well, Matthew 24, okay, yeah, I realize that Matthew 24, 29 and following is about AD 70, but that has nothing to do with the end of the age or the end of the end of time, and that has nothing to do with resurrection. That has nothing to do with Revelation chapter 20. Yes, it does, because it's about the final victory over the forces in the heavenly places. Just as Paul said in Romans chapter 13:11, and now knowing this, it is high time, it's the hour for you to wake out of sleep. Sleep is euphemism for death. High time for you to wake out of sleep. The night is far spent. The day is at hand, has drawn near. What day? The eternal day had drawn near. The day of the final victory over Satan and the spiritual forces in the heavenly places, in the air. And thus 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 is the declaration of the imminent final victory over the spiritual forces of the god of this world, the prince of the power of the air. Air. Yeah. They once walked according that way, but now they're in Christ, and Christ was coming soon to seal that ultimate victory. And by the way, I've got an extensive discussion of the air, the spiritual wickedness in the spiritual realm, in the air, in this book, and what it meant for Paul to say, we're going to meet him in the air. Now remember, got a 3-book special this month of February 2020 for U.S. orders only. Go to my website. You know, the books, if you bought them separately, cost you almost $60. For February 2020, U.S. orders only, yeah, I can offer them even at a greatly reduced price, PDFs for those out of U.S. orders. So contact me. There's a banner on my website. It's DonKPreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Just go there, click on it, and order the book. You'll be glad that you did. Don't forget, we will pick up our review and refutation of Mr. Lance Conley's book. And, you know, tomorrow I'm going to spend a little bit of time. It will be our final discussion on the time element, but I'm going to spend a little bit of more time on Matthew 16, 27, and 28. Because the accusations that he made against me in regard to Matthew 16, 27, and 28, and the confusion that he exhibits not only in his book but in his video and written review of this are really quite amazing. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on Matthew 16, 27, and 28. You don't want to miss that. I'll see you on the flip side.